Everyone,
Not
I'm
yet.
sorry?
Not yet.
Oh.
Sorry, Jeff jumped again.
Oh,
Now you can go.
oh, sorry.
I want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Symmes Township Zoning Commission. If everyone would join me in standing and citing the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance
to
the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and to
and to the republic
for which
for
it
which it stands,
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
for all. Thank you all for attending tonight's Zoom meeting. I apologize. I am attending via telephone. I am in the process of trying to access the meeting via Zoom, but I'm having some technical issues. Jana, can I go ahead and get a roll call, please?
Ms. Bucco,
Here.
Mr. Etter,
I'd unmute.
Oh, he needs to unmute.
Here.
There we
Mr.
go.
Flynn,
Here.
Mr. Kessler,
Here.
Mr. Reichman.
Here.
All right, we have tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion for approval of tonight's agenda?
I motion that we approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second the
Can I get a-
motion.
Mr. Etter,
Yeah,
what were you going to say, Greg?
I was just interrupting you. Go ahead.
Okay. And Cynthia seconded, so Etter, yes. Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Mr. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Reichman,
Yes.
Ms. Bucco.
Yes.
With respect to the approval of minutes for the August meeting, I was not there. I've looked at the meeting minutes and I've watched the video. But before I make a motion or before someone makes a motion, does anyone have any changes to last month's meeting minutes? If not, would someone like to propose a motion for approval?
I noticed one particular nit. It's not that big of a deal, but on page 3, under Darcy Havel, it says in Camp Dennis, the second line, it says, is the village of Indian. There's no hill after it.
If there's no other changes, would someone like to make a motion for approval of the minutes?
I'll motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Happy to second that. I shouldn't, since I wasn't there actually last month. I'll let someone else.
I'll second it.
Mr. Flynn,
Abstain? I was not there.
Mr. Kessler,
I also will abstain since I was absent.
Mr. Reichman,
Yes.
Ms. Bucco,
Yes.
Mr. Etter.
Yes.
Tonight's public hearing is now open. We have 2 items on tonight's agenda. One regards a text amendment. The other involves the Silver Spring House. And I guess a little introduction and background. As far as the Zoom meeting, everyone who has registered to talk or anyone who wants to speak tonight will certainly have an opportunity. It's my understanding you simply raise your hand via Zoom and we will get to you. With respect to time, I simply ask that to the extent others have come before you and said something similar to what you plan on proposing or stating, I would ask as a courtesy that we don't simply repeat what other people before us said. You are more than welcome to address it and show your support for those who have spoken before you. But we're just trying to speed things along. But again, everyone will have an opportunity to speak. I also ask that anyone that does speak identify themselves initially, their name and address, so we have that for the record. In that regard, let's start off with Symmes case number 2020-01, text amendment, review text amendment to the zoning resolution to amend various sections that have been identified. Again, by way of background, it's my understanding this process started on June 2nd when the trustees initiated the text amendment process. Then we've had the initial meeting by the Zoning Commission was in July. At that time, Brian Snyder with the staff provided us with a staff report. We looked at it. There was discussion with the public as well as the commission, and we continued the hearing at that time in order to have the changes that were discussed incorporated into the proposed language so everyone was looking at the same item. The hearing was continued to August. I was not present, but it's my understanding at that time the public hearing again was held. People had an opportunity to voice their concerns. However, it was continued at that time in order to have the staff report posted online, which it was. I can confirm that because I had an opportunity to read it. So it was continued to tonight. So tonight is the third round with respect to the text amendments, and our goal tonight is to have a motion to the trustees with respect to either recommending that these are included or not recommending that these are included. Ultimately, it goes to the trustees who will have a hearing, and there will also be an opportunity for the public to provide some insight. But our goal tonight is simply to provide a recommendation to the trustees. So if any of that, what I said by way of background is incorrect, Brian or anyone else, please feel free to correct me. Otherwise, I will defer to Brian.
So anybody that's here tonight, any of the board members, the commission members that's here tonight, who's missed one of the previous two meetings on this, have you had a chance to review the records of the meetings that you've missed and brought yourself up to speed on all of the details of the case, the testimony offered and all of that?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I read that, and I'm prepared to continue tonight.
Okay. Anybody else
Yes,
missing?
I missed the first, I participated in the first meeting, but not as a designated trustee
You were there though. So
Right.
Okay.
or commissioner.
All right. So then everybody that's here, all the commission members that are here should be able to take action on this tonight and have be fully informed and up to date on all the information.
Right.
I don't have anything else. I presented the staff report in July. And I presented the proposed amendments last month. We talked about the reasoning for all of the amendments and the proposed changes. The changes were posted on the website to allow the public an opportunity to review them. So unless anybody has any questions about the proposed changes tonight, I don't have anything else to present.
I have one question, which either Brian, you or Kim may be able to answer, and that is when we take a motion to approve the amendments, are we making that motion to approve all of them as we determine, or will we take each section separately?
You will do it all at one time. You make one motion for approval. You can choose to include or not include anything that you want, but I wouldn't suggest taking multiple motions unless there's some section of it that the commission can't agree on and you want to vote on it separately.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian, just to understand, Greg sort of mentioned it, our role is to provide a recommendation to the trustees who then have the ultimate vote on the text amendment. Is that true or false?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're only a recommending body.
That's right. It's a legislative action to change the zoning, which is the law for land use. It requires a legislative action and only the legislative body can take that action. So everybody that's made any kind of comments or recommendations up to this point, the only decision that decides whether it is or isn't approved is the trustees. Everybody else is just
And so ours is only a recommendation, and all they need is a majority vote to approve it.
Yes.
There's nothing going against our recommendation, but they need a majority or something like that. Or
No, they used
Correct.
to. State law was changed to no longer require a unanimous vote when they were changing the zoning commission's decision, probably about 10 years ago. So now it's just a simple majority to take action of the board of trustees.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to make sure I understood.
No problem.
Any other comments from the panel before I open it up to the public again?
Brian, this is George. I did read your summation, and I'm looking at page 3 of your report dated July 2, and in that you talk about that the township would be better served by an adoption of a separate property maintenance code. So if we believe or agree with that, when we go to summarize whether or not we're going to recommend approval, would we just attach that as an amendment to the approval?
No, if you think the trustees should do a property maintenance code, I would think you would want to, that wouldn't be part of this process. What you're reviewing are the text amendments that were presented, and you can decide whether you want to leave the property maintenance type sections in the recommendation or take them out. But if you take them out, and you tell the trustees that they should adopt the property maintenance code, it's not something that that needs to be part of this recommendation. Either the text amendment is in or it's out, and that's your recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg, by the way, we can see you now.
Put some pants on.
I just thought he'd like to know.
That's all. You have to unmute yourself though, Greg. Oh, so now his device doesn't have a speaker or a mic. Oh, no, there it is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can see you.
Uh-oh. Watch what I say. All right, with that in mind, do we want to, let's go ahead and open it up to the public. If people have any comments, now's your chance to express your in favor of or opposition to.
Okay, so everybody that's in all the attendees, I'm going to lower everybody's hands. If you want to speak on this issue, you can raise your hand and we'll go in order from top to bottom. So the first person to speak about this issue is Stephen Wolf. And Mr. Wolf, you are now able to speak.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. First of all, you all were live before the meeting, so we heard everything before the meeting. We were completely live, so you might want to know
Hopefully,
that.
Live to the people who were attending the meeting, but not live broadcast, right?
I saw everything before the banner went up. I heard everything.
Oh, that wasn't officially on the record then.
It doesn't matter, but it was kind of funny. So anyway, I want to go on record again. I'm sorry.
Could you please state your name and address, please?
Oh yeah, Stephen Wolf, 11740 Symmes Valley Drive, Loveland 45140. So first I wanted to say that I just wanted to go on the record again in my opposition to the text amendment, specifically the part having to do with RVs and campers and boats. You know, I think it's unfair that people that have worked hard for those things that give them pleasure are then constrained from their use at their home. And I think that's just not fair, regardless of their perceived income level or their social status. They should be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And so that's the first thing. See, there was something else. Oh, and as we speak, two of my neighbors have their camping trailers in their driveways that would be in violation of what's proposed, and they are on Symmes Valley Drive and Symmes Creek, which are neighborhoods with houses that are in $350,000 range. So, you know, doesn't really matter. People like to do that. They're not bothering anybody, and nobody really cares in my neighborhood about that. So I don't know why we're, penalizing people with RVs and campers and boats and whatever. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, Mr. Wolf, those regulations are currently in the zoning resolution. That's not something that's being added. Only the word RV is being added to the list of things that are already prohibited. So your two neighbors that have them in their driveway currently are in violation of the current zoning resolution. And that's not being discussed by the commission tonight.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be able to park my RV on the street so I can load it and unload it to go on a camping trip or to wash it or do anything like that. And that's, I don't usually park it in my driveway because I have an inclined driveway. That makes it difficult to park it. So, that causes a problem for me.
So
And, I'm not hurting anybody.
Your opposition is to the part about it being in the right of way?
That's correct.
Okay.
And into the yard, because I can't pull it in my yard either now, because that's not allowed with even if I wanted to put it in my backyard, I couldn't do that to wash it or do some repair or anything. I have to travel to the storage lot with my tools and all my groceries and all my clothes and all this. It makes it a real pain.
Well, currently you are actually allowed to have your RV in your rear yard.
I know, but this would cause me a problem as proposed.
This wouldn't change that. You'd still be able to park your RV in the rear yard.
But I wouldn't be able to put it on the street.
No, that's correct.
Yeah, so I oppose that. Because being on the street is a paved surface, and sometimes my yard is wet, and I've already had to have it towed out once. So I've been there, done that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go on to the next, anybody have any questions?
I do not.
No.
All right, so the next person that's here to speak on this issue is Richard Goldberg. All right, Mr. Goldberg, if you unmute yourself, you're able to speak.
Does it indicate that he's here?
Yeah, he's in. He's just he's muted. All right, well, we'll go on to the next one.
Greg, if you go to participants, you can see the list. You go on the bottom of your screen, there's a panel that says participants.
Oops. I have stuff on my top panel.
Mr. Goldberg is still muted, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Goldberg is muted. I disabled and re-established his ability to talk, but he's still not.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, welcome.
Hi, I'm sorry. I wanted to speak on the second item on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, then don't raise your hand while we're talking about the text amendments, and I won't put you back into the.
Okay. Is that better or not?
I'm gonna disable you, and then we'll add you back when we get to the Silver Spring House.
Thank you so much.
All right. And the next one is Carol Symmes.
Welcome, Ms. Symmes.
Now I think you can hear me. My name's CJ Carr, 10403 Willow Drive. Little confusion, or at least we are. I know Brian had said that it doesn't have to be spelled out by item, but are we looking more towards the revised staff report wording, or are we looking as the trustees adopted the resolution when it goes into the vote as to adopting section, so on and so forth?
That's kind of the point of tonight's hearing.
That's why I said, how is that going to be listed out? I mean, we're more in favor of the staff report wording than the trustees wording. So if it came down to it, we don't have to really say much about the staff report wording. Or if we just said that and said, I'm more in favor of the staff report wording than the resolution wording that was started by the trustees.
Frank's changes.
I think that's our decision that we'll address once we've heard from all the attendees.
So
Okay.
are you going to state it by section?
Your statement that you're more in favor of them, that could be your statement for the record.
Right. More in favor of the staff report wording than the wording that the trustees are trying to adopt. Correct.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, thank you.
All right. I do not see any other hands raised to speak on this issue. So,
All right, in that regard, we will close the public hearing portion with respect to the text amendments. And I would open up to my fellow colleagues as far as discussion.
I apologize. Let me do one more thing before we do that. There's somebody in here that has a phone number and they may not be able to ask to raise their hand. So let me add them and see if they have something to say.
In that regard, I will open the public hearing back up to see who this person is.
I just realized. Okay, so somebody that called in with the last three numbers 943 is now able to speak if they would like to speak about the text amendments.
You unmute yourself.
But yes, you would have to unmute yourself. That'd be the phone caller with the last three 943. Okay.
All right, I will once again close the public hearing portion of the text amendment and open it up to discussion among my colleagues. I would simply preface that with my recommendation is to incorporate staff's modifications as referenced, I guess, in the staff report. The four specific sections dealing with sidewalk, fence maintenance, driveways, and the fence and utility right away. I'm happy with those amendments, and modifying those sections from the original trustee resolution or incorporating those, I'm in favor of.
I agree with Greg.
I do too. I think that it's a nice means of addressing what really needs to be in there and still also addressing the trustees and staff's concerns with regard to the update sections in reference.
I agree as well. And I just want to thank Brian because you clearly spent a lot of time and energy on researching this and putting it together. And I think we've done our due diligence with the community with regard to providing more than adequate information for their review. And I do appreciate all their comments. And I do understand that everything we do doesn't make everybody happy, but I think in total, I think this captures the spirit of what we're trying to do here in the township.
Thank you, Greg. I will say that Kim did all the hard part of it. Editing is much easier than writing it from scratch. So
it was a lot of work.
I appreciate the compliment, but I believe that was George.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
George.
just so I'm clear, just so I know what you guys are going forward with, the section 51.4 and the section 51.5, section 143.3 and 346, the ones as Brian, changed. And then does that mean only everything else that I proposed or the trustees proposed is okay with you all, but just amending those sections that I just mentioned? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's my preference.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm clear with that.
And I did have one question with regard to enforcement of these. So if these were to be approved by the trustees, so I know I'm getting the cart a little bit before the horse, but who is responsible for administering these sections, or if there's a fence that does not meet the standards?
That would be Brian's bailiwick.
Okay.
So what we would do is we would call Brian or we would call Emily. And like for sidewalks, they're going to catch those anytime somebody submits a building permit. So that'll get flagged at that time. And then under fences, we would have to call Brian or Emily to come out Emily to come out and look at that. And then driveway surfaces, that's going to be caught during a building permit, you know, when somebody submits for a permit. And same for fences. Fences will be caught at the same time that they apply for a permit.
Unless, of course, it's an existing fence that's not meeting the standards.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we would only send them a notice if we had a problem, you know, like the reason that came forward with the setback from the fence is because we actually had somebody that put a fence right up next to a fire hydrant, and then we couldn't open the fire hydrant lid. We couldn't turn the wrench all the way around. So that's why that came about.
Right. I
So
know
we
that.
would probably send them a notice then.
Yeah, I know there's a house on Union Cemetery that has a pool that does not have a fully enclosed fence. So.
See, and that's why we wanted the fence regulations, because we have, you know, the building department requires the fence around the pool, but then there's no mechanism after that to go back out and enforce it. So.
Right. Okay, thank you.
If there's no other comments, would someone like to make a motion with respect to the text amendment?
I motion that we amend sections 54.1, 51.5, 62.14-3, 66.14-3, 70.14-3, 74.14-3, 78.14-3, 82.14-3, 143.3, 143.4, 171.7, 191, 319, 342.5, and 346 of the Symmes Township resolution, Symmes Township zoning resolution. And I want to make clear sections 51.4, 51.5, 143.3, and 346 are to be modified per staff's recommendation.
Second that.
Ms. Fuco,
Yes.
Mr. Etter,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Mr. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Reichman.
Yes.
Just a reminder to those people that are attending as participants tonight and have spoken on this in the past, I would encourage you to follow up with the trustees when this is addressed at their meeting, to voice your concerns, either approval or disapproval at that time as well. Next up on the agenda tonight is Symmes case number 2014-02, Silver Spring House 3. Review an amended application for a final development plan to allow the construction of a 3,158 square foot building addition and a walk-in cooler on the main building, and installation of a 500 square foot storage shed on the property. The subject property is located at 8322 East Kemper Road.
Okay, so staff report, Mr. Kessler, sorry.
No, go right ahead, Brian, please.
So Brian Snyder with Hamilton County prepared a staff report for this final development plan modification case. This is for an addition to the Silver Spring House restaurant. The proposal is to construct an addition onto the rear of the existing restaurant, 3,158 square foot building addition. The building height would be 16 feet. And a total of 12 parking spaces would be removed in the area where the addition would be constructed. So it would be coming out the back. There's one 12 space kind of parking area with a landscape island around it that would be removed for the addition. The Applicant has submitted a parking analysis indicating that there are enough parking spaces on the site to meet the parking requirements still without the 12 and including the additional space. They do have an agreement for parking spaces on the adjacent property, the Lucky office building next door, that was agreed as part of a settlement for the approval of that development. That part of the property, those 19 spaces in that whole office building, it's a whole separate zone change. It's not part of the discussion tonight. Staff did review this for compliance with the Symmes Township Trustees resolution for case 2014-2 and found that this would comply with all of the conditions. There are no issues other than the fact that the stamped concrete fenced in area that they're showing adjacent to the addition appears like they may intend for that to be actual outdoor seating space. And if they're intending to serve customers in that area, it would have to be added to the area of the restaurant used for their parking analysis. So we need some clarification from the applicant on what that area is for. And then the 500 square foot storage shed that they're adding they're proposing to add next to the dumpster would take 3 parking spaces. It would fit into the pavement for the 3 parking spaces. So they're not adding any additional paved area as part of any of the expansion other than in the landscape island that would be removed. But the storage shed we don't have any details for it. I'm assuming it would meet the maximum height. There's no issue with setbacks. It meets all the zoning requirements. We just don't have we don't have a lot of details on it, but there wouldn't be any negative impacts on the adjacent property owners from having the shed. The doors would face towards the parking lot, which would be away from the adjacent residents to the north and to the east. None of the buffering or landscaping along those 2 property lines would be impacted or removed as part of this addition. So all the buffering would remain in place. And then everything along the street would be the same as it is today. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Brian, if I can.
Brian.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Brian, on the accessory use, is there a different height restriction for an accessory use opposed to the main use?
No, on a retail property, there's actually not an accessory use. So any structure is considered a main structure. So there's no limitation on the size or the height other than the same height restrictions for main buildings, which is like 35 feet in height. So it's not going to be anywhere near that.
Okay.
I have a question, Brian. Maybe I'm misreading this. I'm looking for some clarification regarding the parking. On sheet 6 of 7 of the drawings, it says that there are 294 existing seats, that new indoor seats would be 144 and new outdoor seats of 47, which would be a total of 485 seats versus 294 existing. Are these additions of almost 200 seats indoors and out part of this development? And if so, I'm surprised. How do they meet the parking requirements?
Well, it's based on square foot area. It's 1 to 100 square feet of restaurant area. It's the 1 parking space per 100 square feet of restaurant space is the way that parking is determined.
And currently they basically have more parking space than necessary?
Yes, that's right.
I guess based on how crowded the parking lot is all the time, that really surprises me.
Me too. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to get a parking spot there even today in the COVID era, let alone pre-COVID. And to think that they're going to add 144 indoor seats and 30 or 40 outdoor seats. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what the parking situation is going to be like.
Yeah, I guess just in reviewing it, knowing what it's like when you go by there or you go there, I was shocked that the parking requirements were still being met.
So they're required to have 122 spaces and they're providing 150.
Okay.
Brian, can you give us, or at least me, some background as to the how the current structure came about? And when I say structure, the tent structure, is that a temporary, and how long is it allowed to be there? And How many does that seat?
The temporary structure that's there,
Correct.
I don't believe it's permitted to be there. It might have been something that was not enforced strongly because of COVID. We had a lot of restaurants that wanted to be able to serve people with the limited capacity, not allowing people inside when they first opened up and only allowed outdoor seating. We had a lot of people throw a lot of chairs, tables, and tents out into the parking lots when that happened. I'm assuming that this would take care of that. Regardless, though, it is a zoning violation at some point that will be enforced.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Brian, first question. Is the structure planned to have a basement with it as well?
I don't believe so. The applicant can answer that, though, I think.
I think it shows it.
Does it show a basement?
Yeah.
It does. In the upper left-hand corner and the upper right corner.
On page 6, sheet 6.
Well, Brian Ball could probably address that.
All right, I guess we'll ask the applicant what's the purpose and what's the plan there. Second question I got is, so of the 150 parks that they have, are any of those calculated using the easement with the office property next door?
Yes, 19 of those come from the office next door.
And utilizing parking for retail use in an office district, I guess that is permitted per our code?
Yes, it's a commercial district, yes.
Okay.
I believe that there's a portion of the office property that's zoned retail. The line doesn't run right along the property line on that side of the property, if I recall.
Yeah, it kind of is at an angle, yeah.
Right.
But
So we own some of those spaces that are at technically zoned retail and on the Silver Spring House property. So there was a swap where the Spring House gets some of the parking, and it's basically an easement to reflect the fact that they had those little triangle areas that they couldn't use.
Okay. All right. I have some more questions, but that's related to the applicant. So I will stop at this point.
I
Hey,
have one.
Brian, if I go ahead, Jeff.
Just one real quick question. In the documentation, it talks about the fact that 2 maple trees and 9 shrubs are going to be removed from the landscaping. Do we have any requirement relative to removal of trees and the fact that they need to be replaced elsewhere?
Yeah, the staff report does discuss that. So they're losing spaces, so the number of required trees and shrubs in the interior of the parking lot goes down, but probably not enough to make it that they don't have to plant anything else. So I think the suggestion in the staff report was that they submit a landscape plan that meets the requirements, including the interior. So if they have to replant the trees and shrubs that they're losing, then they have to show that on the landscape plan.
Mm-hmm. And then one final thing on the side street, which is Kemper Road. Presently, there's not a sidewalk that is located on that street. Under the newly recommended rules, would we require that they put a sidewalk in there?
I wouldn't think that you would require them to put a sidewalk on that side street for a development that's already done unless they were doing something on that side. Like if they were expanding the parking lot along Kemper or Snyder Road, then maybe it would make sense. But if they're talking about doing something on the complete opposite side of the property and they were approved prior to that requirement being in effect, I wouldn't, it would be hard to justify making them put a sidewalk on the other side.
Okay.
Similar to, well, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's it.
Hey, Brian, this is Todd. You mentioned when you're presenting this that there was an area of stamped concrete that you were unsure of what the intended use was and if they were going to have seating there.
Yeah, it looks like
If
they've
I-
got it on that sheet 6. I don't know if I typically don't look at floor plan sheets because it doesn't matter what's happening inside the building, but they do actually show the outside with the seating on it. So they'll probably have to redo their parking analysis to include that area.
Okay, so in your opinion, then that area is not part of the parking analysis, which is a square foot analysis, and they very well could be underparked.
I don't believe they're going to be underparked, given that they've got another 28 parking spaces till they meet the requirement. I think they'll be able to make that, they'll be able to make the numbers work anyway. They'll meet zoning.
Okay.
To the extent there's cars parked, I presume, illegally on the Snyder berm there. Often when I drive by, I'll see cars parked in the grass on the side of Snyder. Who enforces that, or is it enforceable?
If it's in the right of way, it's and it's parked on the grass in the right of way, it's typically enforced by the sheriff's office. The county engineer can decide whether they're allowed to park in the right of way, and if you're violating that, I believe it's between the county engineer and the sheriff's office to enforce parking illegally inside the county road right of way.
Any other questions for Brian? Thank you very much, Brian. At this time, I will ask the applicant to come forth, identify yourself, a name and an address, please, and let us know what you think.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Dahl with Cincinnati United Contractors representing Silver Spring House, address 7143 East Kemper Road. I would like to address some of the things in the staff report. It's fairly comprehensive. Just wanted to clarify a few things that you guys talked about. First of all, regarding the parking, so we have 150 total of the reserved parking spots for the Silver Spring House. Those 150 are within the parking lot around them. And then if you look on page 1 of 7, you'll see there's a hatched area. It's just a diagonal hatch that shows the additional 19 that creates that 150. So that is exclusive to Silver Spring House in the entire time. Nobody else shares those parking. Then there are 28 additional spaces, which Silver Spring House is only allowed to have from 5 a.m. or excuse me, 5 a.m., 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. So during the peak times, they have an additional 28 that they can access above and beyond the 150. So they're very adequately parked for what they have. And then as far as the tent, just to let you know, the tent was permitted by the tent company. They went and got a zoning and building approval for it. And then another thing that I want to clarify is the stamped concrete fenced in area. If you look at page 6 of 7, there is a analysis at the bottom that shows the amount of seating. 294 plus 144, so 294 is existing, 144 is the interior, the new interior, 47 is the new outdoor for a total of 45. And if you go to the page 1 of 7, which has a parking analysis, that equals that 485 seat capacity. And that is what we are basing the parking lot upon, the actual seat capacity. Now, this isn't what they can get right now, obviously, because of COVID. So they're not getting as many as they can now. This would be 485 to when they're, post-COVID season, when they're full open and bore, and they can get as many tables as they can possibly get in there. But right now, they're not being able to get that many. So that area is a fenced-in area that will be fenced in with aluminum fencing to about 4 foot high as shown on the, on that page 6 of 7. And that's that area right there is where we get the additional 47 seats in the outdoor area that we are accounting for in the parking calculation. And with those clarifications, I'd like to open it up for any questions that you guys might have.
I do have one question for you. Since it was brought up by the commission, the basement area, there's a basement being constructed under the addition?
That's correct.
So is that being calculated as part of the seating capacity?
No, because there's no seating down in the basement.
But it's got restaurants, or I mean, it's got restrooms?
That is for the employees. So basically, the employees are going to go down there and they're going to put away their belongings in the lockers. And then that's for those restrooms are for them only. And then there's going to be storage dry goods and beer coolers down there that service the bars above.
So there is a parking calculation for that. It's 1 for every 2,000 square feet for storage. Okay.
So one parking space for every what?
2,000 square feet of storage.
So then we'd just be adding one more parking space.
Okay.
So then that actual parking space calculation would go from a required of 122 to 123.
Can you give me an idea what the current occupancy is for the current building in tent in terms of COVID numbers? What's the maximum number of people they could have there?
I cannot answer that. I'm going to have to defer to the owners on that one.
Right now, we currently seat. Hi, my name is Joe Smith. We currently seat about 133 outside, I do believe, underneath the tent.
Is that total, indoors and outdoors?
Of the tent. And inside right now with the COVID situation, I didn't make another count. I could find that out for you. But we took a lot of, all those seats that are outside under the tent were inside the restaurant. So you can cut our seating capacity and to 130 something. So.
But the reason I ask,
go ahead.
The reason I ask is I drove by last night around 7 o'clock in the evening. And when I drove by, I saw a car on the grass berm by Snyder. There were a handful of spots open in the parking lot itself. I saw 4 cars parked up against the curb of the restaurant. And then I saw, I think, one on the curb near the dumpsters. And I saw cars parked over there near the Kemper offices, but within your authorized spots. And that was 7 o'clock COVID, and it was almost full, if not pretty close to full. And my concern with the parking is in terms of numbers. We're looking at the existing square footage was about 7,300, and you want to add on about 3,500, which is about 50%. And then you want to up seating capacity from an existing 294 to 485. And that's about another 191 seats, which is give or take 65%. And if the lot is almost full now, when you add that in, I know, I guess I'm concerned where these people are going to park.
Well, they'll find a spot. We have, like those
I'm
guys.
sure they will.
Off of the current parking next to us, to the east of us, they're allowed to park over there after 5 o'clock. I don't know if you looked at that area to see if there were any cars in that area.
There were not. I mean, if there were very few. And okay. I know in the past you guys had an arrangement with CHCA. Is that still valid, or?
At night at the school.
At the school
itself. Yes, that's valid.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Joe, this is George Flynn. I was at the meeting about 2 years ago when you asked to enclose your outside area. And at the time, I specifically asked you, Joe, is this it? and you said, yeah, this is it. And so, look, you do a phenomenal job. You're an icon in the community, and I frequent your restaurant as well. I'm a patron, obviously a member of this commission and a member of the community. We want you here. You employ people. You do community service stuff. I mean, you're great. Okay, so I want you to take this as how it's intended. Okay, if a restaurant, I'm in the development business. Okay, and if Darden showed up, and Darden owns Yard House and Olive Garden and some of these major restaurants. And frankly, these restaurants do probably similar volumes that you do, maybe even less. And if they showed up with a 10,000 square foot restaurant, which is kind of where we're going here, it'd be a 20-to-1 park ratio. They know this, okay? They need to satisfy that many people. And they're not probably doing the number you're doing. So that would take us up to 200 parks. I'd really like to see you figure out how to get the 200 parks, because personally, I'm with my colleague on this. I drive by there, I see, and I know sometimes you can't help what people do. You can't watch everybody, but yeah, they do park in the right of way. They do park in the area that they're not supposed to park. It's for fire lanes. This is a good thing. You're successful, okay? And we don't want to limit you, but we have an obligation to be on the safe side for the community. And I want you to think about that. And I'm not sure how I'm going to vote tonight, but I'm making an appeal to you from a standpoint of this is a big concern, and it's always been a concern. And I'm going to have a tough time getting past this at this point. I just kind of want to make that appeal to you directly.
With all due respect, George, we've had, this is a request from a lot of our customer base. We cannot accommodate the larger parties, and that's part of our problem. We want to be able to accommodate the larger parties, and maybe even take off some of our wait time that we have there. I think, I don't know what to say about the parking situation. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, because we do turntables. And so it's just hard to, I'm sorry, Joe, if you want. Will be more if you turn tables. Yeah, well, the parking will be more if we're able to turn the tables. But with the event, with people having larger parties there, people seem to, when they have larger parties, they tend to come in the same car, whether it's a wedding rehearsal or a retirement party, anything like that. So we feel that we'll be able to accommodate them. And I don't think the parking is going to be that big of an issue. I think people are starting to realize they have to double up or triple up in their cars. A lot of the customers are finding that out now. But with the school being available to us, which they've been incredible, we've been great neighbors with the school. They welcome us parking over in their parking lot at night at the high school itself.
I hear you. And I don't know if you'd be amenable to having your own, parking cop, if you will, to make sure that especially during your peak times, that people are parking where they should be, maybe across the street, maybe in the property next door, but not in the fire lanes, not in the grass areas, et cetera, because it's difficult for this board to consider more expansion and more expansion and more expansion. And there's a parking concern here. I have it. I can't speak for all my colleagues, but I just kind of want to throw that out there.
Okay, George, we are probably going to go to valet as well. We've had it once before, but we're probably going to end up going back with valet if you think that might help part of the problem.
I think it would show that you're trying to address what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's definitely a possibility. We've discussed, my partner and I have discussed that parking. So,
and again, we love you. You're great for the community. We we want you to continue to succeed.
Okay.
Yeah, I would hold that out too. And I think you've done a great job, even with your little golf cart that you drive around and pick up patrons from the far edges of your parking lot. So, you know, I think I recognize that you're doing about all you can. I mean, your problem is your success, which is a good problem to have. So, you know, it was my concern initially when I read this report that parking just doesn't make sense. I have a concern about parking at the school because then you're talking about crossing Kemper Road, which is dark and unlit at night. And, you know, so now you got patrons that are, you know, crossing a dark, somewhat busy road. But, you know, it's definitely a concern, but, you know, I think, again, whether it's the valet or the golf cart, I think, you know, you probably are doing about all you can. And it's just then a question of, you know, when's enough?
Yeah, there is a crosswalk there as well. I don't know if you saw that, and it's lit. I'm not sure if you guys are missing that right on the corner of Kemper and Snyder.
Joe, clarification, the spots east of your site that belong to the office condos, can you use those, all of them, or just 18 of them after hours?
Actually, we can use more than that. It's all the way down on Kemper Road. We have access all the way down to Kemper Road. And that's what I think some people are, getting back to Greg's issue, some people are lazy and they don't want to walk all the way over there. That's why they're finding all kinds of other places to park. Greg and George's concern. And that's something we can stress a little bit more. I think we could do a better job with that. I totally agree with you on that one.
It would seem to me, if you take all that into consideration, there is enough space, but it requires a parking cop,
right,
or the golf cart to make. There are appropriate places for your patrons to park. They're just not choosing to park there.
I agree, Cynthia. You're right. That's because I look out there and they're circling the parking lot and there's plenty of spots down there. After 5 or 6 o'clock, we have access to probably 75 spots. I think I can go count them. I apologize. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but we have quite a few spots down there, along with the 19 that we currently own.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joe, this is Todd. I'm struggling with a couple things that sort of per this conversation that's going on. Is you mentioned when you're talking to George that you want to accommodate larger parties, and as everyone on the board, we're residents and we frequent there and find it very enjoyable. But as I'm looking at the floor plan that you presented, you're not adding, in my opinion, and my expert opinion is that, you're not adding large party space. You're adding a large bar, which would indicate single users. You're not adding a private room that would then therefore accommodate large parties. So I'm struggling with that analysis on your part. And also I think sort of from the group, and you sort of touched upon it, you know, and Brian sort of hit on also, is if there is a parking problem and everyone wants to be close and doesn't want to walk, but at the same time, safety is number one. And that's really the goal of this board, is we don't feel, or at least I shouldn't say we, I should say I don't feel that it should be it should be the responsibility, of a resident reaching out to the police, who then reaches out to the engineer to make sure things aren't being parked correctly. It's not our responsibility. And you as the owner and the operator, you need to take that responsibility, in my opinion. And, you know, that's just how I feel about this. Obviously, parking is a big deal. You know, from a restaurant and from what you're doing, you know, I think you've gotten enough kudos and pats on the back that are well-deserved. I really do. But, you know, I'm with the rest of the board in the thought process of parking has always been an issue. It's been an issue forever. I've been probably coming here for 20 years and it's been an issue, and it continues to be an issue. So that's just sort of my 2 cents to the board and yourself.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Better job on our parking. That's what we can, we can work on that on our end.
Any other questions for the, I'm sorry, finish up, Joe.
No, just using the lot to the east of us more effectively.
The Kemper offices.
Correct.
Does anyone have any other questions for the applicant before I open it up to the public? In that regard, I will now open it up to the public to provide any comments, good or bad. Brian, if you can help me out, and who's
Yeah,
next?
no problem. So anybody that wants to speak on this issue can raise their hand. I do have an Ivanka Jara guy. I'm not really sure.
Yes, hello. Thank you.
Could you provide your name and address, please?
Sure. Ivanka Jauregui, 11446 Avant Lane. So basically I am right behind, like right across from Kemper, but right, I can see Silver Spring House from my house. Huge fan of the restaurant, love going there. But it's obviously in a very overcrowded space. It doesn't have space now. It didn't have space before COVID. It didn't have space 8 years ago. As a matter of fact, when I bought the house, people were telling me how lucky I was that I had this house, because now I can actually park. I didn't have to look for parking when I had to go to the restaurant. And that was like 9 years ago, okay? So the 50% increase in footprint is clearly concerning from, we've already talked the parking situation. They park in CHCA in the high school. A lot of times that parking space is taken by students and parents, so it's not available. We all know that. And they also park on the parking that is the extra parking that CHCA has right across from Heartland. And it's, as I understand, it's supposed to be closed by 9 p.m., but that is not the case. It's always being used with by people going to Silver Spring House. And from what I understand, and you guys maybe can correct me, as I understand the facilities, the commercial facilities that are also on Kemper, they shouldn't have any parking after 5 p.m. So maybe that's another thing that needs to be clarified, because that was the agreement when they built that area. So I'm very concerned that they would add 50% footprint. They will construct really roughly a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage. That's the size of the shed. It's pretty large. So, we've already talked enough about the parking. We haven't talked about the traffic that would cause, the additional traffic in that area. There's a lot of, it's just not very easy to see, especially at night. Additional lighting, activity, and noise for all of us that live right next to it. And also potentially having activity much later in the evening. Today, roughly at 10 p.m., it's when they're closed, or really where there's not a lot of activity, but it could be a lot more than that. And that, not to mention all the construction, because when they had the construction in the past on all of that area, it was happening through the night, and I could hear it inside my house. So even if that we can manage things within the construction, we're basically going to have a 60% more people going there, much more traffic, much more noise, much more ability to, alcohol, beverages, and I hope not music. And yes, it's very concerning for sure. And even when you have outdoor seating and you have all these nice fences, if there's outdoor seating, noise travels, So we're in a very quiet residential area. That's why people buy homes here. That's what's appealing about the area. And I think the important part is really just like, all of us love Silver Spring House and we want Silver Spring House to be successful. We have an investment that we have to take care of, which is our homes. And we put a lot of money into it, a lot of time into it. So the question here is going to be, are we going to go after the benefit of one business versus the benefit of all of us that live here, that our homes will be impacted from this change. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask Ivanka a clarifying question. You gave your address, but are you in Heartland or are you on the street north of the site?
I'm in Heartland. So I'm in
Okay.
Heartland, and you know, we always, I mean, through the summer, we got takeout all the time from Symmes Springhouse. So huge fans of the restaurant. Yes, and I'm not sure if they've ever had music, but I know that I've heard it inside my house, and I was wondering if it was CHCA having something. But yes, I'm right behind, like right across from it, if you will.
Thank you.
Brian, who do we have next?
All right, next we have Mark Steinhardt.
Mr. Steinhardt, if you can provide us your name and address, please.
Let's see, I have to promote him to a panelist because he's using an older version of Zoom.
I'll second the promotion.
All right, so now he is able to speak. Mark Steinhardt.
Mr. Steinhardt? Mark, are you there?
We can see him, but we can't hear him. He's not muted. He's speaking. He does not have a speaker. I'm sorry, he doesn't have a microphone.
It's always something, isn't it?
So, Mr. Steinhardt, we're not going to be able to hear you unless you have a speaker.
Microphone.
Yeah, I keep saying speaker. Unless you have a microphone.
Microphone, or you want to call in?
Call in.
Right, yes. No, we can see you, but we can't hear you.
Is the call-in information provided to the public?
I'm not.
It might be, or it looks like he's doing it now, but it might be a good idea to try and unplug the headphones. Maybe it'll recognize the microphone.
Right.
Or calling in is a good idea as well.
So, did you try and unplug your headphones, Mr. Steinhardt? Okay.
You want to?
Let's see. There is one more person. I guess I'll leave him on the panel in case he gets it figured out. Richard Goldberg is next to speak.
Mr. Goldberg, welcome. If you could provide us your name and address, please.
Okay.
That's a feedback issue.
I guess I'll turn the computer part off.
Yeah. Yes.
You can have both on.
He disappeared.
You turned off the wrong part, maybe. I don't know. Let's put this number back in. We tried it once before. But no, still muted, not unmuting. Okay, we have one more person, Marcia.
I see where. There we go.
You are muted. Press help me out.
Oh, so now Marcia is with Richard Goldberg?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can't. Mr. Goldberg, if you could.
Okay, it's me. This is Richard Goldberg.
Your address?
Are you ready for me?
Yes.
I live at 8354 Jeanette Lane with my family. We've lived here almost 30 years, and we're in Heartland. The big issue is going to be parking. What we have here is we're going from this modification takes us from a medium family sized restaurant to the shed is 500 square feet. That's 25 by 20. That's more like a small barn, I'd say, than a shed. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it seems like it's big enough for more than storage. The 3,558 square foot addition is going to require, I think from your numbers, 191 extra parking spaces. And I think there'll be an increase. I think we're thinking 48 extra parking spaces are going to be needed because you need one per every 4 seats. Or one for every 100 feet, whichever is greater. So I'm looking at possibly 48 extra parking spaces are needed that we don't have.
I think that the 191 is the total number of new customers.
Well, if you divide that by 4, because you need one space for every 4 extra seats, you get about 48 extra seats are needed. And I believe that's correct. There also are some misconceptions about, there's some mistakes been stated about the parking in the adjacent lots. The Kemper Road lot has authority to take 19 parking spaces. Silver Spring House has 19 of those spaces, no more. And that's part of a court-ordered settlement that I have a copy of it. I was a party to that lawsuit. So they cannot expand into the Kemper Road office space beyond 19 spaces. The parking that Silver Spring House uses at Cincinnati Hills on Snyder Road, I've counted both after 9 o'clock in the evening and before 9 in the evening. They use, give or take a few, 35 spaces there. That parking is coming to an end because that's in contradiction to that court order. In fact, there are no cars allowed in that lot after 9 p.m. anytime unless there's a school function. That lot is for the school. It's not for Silver Spring House. It's not for commercial purposes. So Silver Spring is about to lose 35 spaces at Cincinnati Hills, and they're going to need another 48 for the development. That's about 83 parking spaces they're short in an already tight situation. So the parking is a very, very bad situation. Those 35 spaces, that's give or take 1 or 2 on any given night. I've been in touch with the head of school at Cincinnati Hills, and they are going to be closing that lot off at 9 o'clock every evening. I don't know if Silver Spring's aware of that, but that was originally the court order when that property was rezoned for the school. So if you notice, the gate on Snyder Road has recently started to become locked at 9 o'clock. And as soon as the Kemper Road gate, I think they're ordering parts for that Kemper Road gate, that part of the lot is going to be locked off at 9 o'clock too. So the Silver Spring employees that have been using the Cincinnati Hills lot are not going to be allowed to as soon as they put up a gate on Kemper Road. So Silver Spring's losing 35 spaces there. They need 48 more spaces for the new structure they're proposing. That's a net loss of 83. They need 83 spaces that they don't have. And they can't go on to Kemper Road because there's a maximum of 19 there. So with that parking situation is already dangerous. Cars are parked almost daily in the grass on Snyder Road. This is a dangerous situation, as has been discussed. That is just an accident waiting to happen, and that's right across the street from the high school. On school nights, on school activity nights, there's a lot of children, young adults and children driving to and from that school, and you have illegal parking on Snyder Road right across the street because they don't have enough parking as it is now. Just you drive by on any given night at 6 o'clock, especially on a Friday or Saturday, and that lot's overflowing. And they're losing 35. The employees are no longer going to be allowed to park off premises. So the in the structure, the 3,158 square foot structure includes a lower level. I'm not sure why they need a lower level. I know there's bathrooms down there and a locker rooms being proposed. And some of this I'll have some questions about. Are they going to be able to expand, add seating into the lower level? Are they going to be able to renovate the lower level to make it accessible for restaurateurs, private parties, weddings, Christmas parties? I don't know if they're allowed to do that under the proposal that's on the table. The 3,158 square feet above, can that be closed off from the existing restaurant? Can that be used to serve as private parties? Because they've got a large bar they've proposed in there. Can that be used for private parties? And if it can, under this proposal, then you have later hours, probably more drinking than is in a family type style restaurant. Christmas parties, weddings, and private parties only leads to the potential for more drinking and more drunk drivers driving out of there, right across from the high school, and with a parking situation that is now and will become intolerable if this thing passes. So we have a serious safety issue that all comes back to the parking. The addition that's being proposed really is not consistent with the residential neighborhoods that are north and south of the restaurant. It's not real compatible. You have lighting situation that's going to increase. There's a potential for more noise. There's a potential for more music if there are in fact parties. So the concern I have and why I think this should be turned down is because the size, the appearance, the parking, the safety issue, and its incompatibility with the existing surroundings. But to say that it's just not correct to say that he can use the Kemper Road parking lot. He can't. 19 spaces and that's it. That's under a court order. And the Cincinnati Hills parking lot is also under a court order. It's just never been obeyed or enforced. But as recently as this past week, I've been in touch with the head of school at Cincinnati Hills. I've been in touch with the Sycamore Township, the president of the Sycamore Township Board of Trustees, and they are going to enforce that the lot not to be used for commercial purposes. It's a school parking lot for school use, students and school functions, not for the Silver Spring House employees. The last time or two Silver Spring House has come before this board, at least the last time and maybe two, they have said this is the last time we're coming before you for an expansion. We're at our limits, which they have been. And now to grant this would put them over the limit. It would really create an unsafe environment in the surrounding vicinity around the restaurant. The restaurant is attractive. It's well maintained. It's been here a long time, and I'd like to say they are good neighbors, and I'd like to keep it that way. But we have a paramount issue of safety that's going to be directly impacted if this board approves this proposal. So and my information, I've gone over the zoning code. When I say every 4 seats needs a parking spot, that's going to require an additional 48 more spots, which they don't have now, and they're losing 35. And they can't go beyond the 19 to the east. So that's my input to this. And if I've misstated something, Brian, let me know. But I've gone over the zoning code. I'm familiar with the court orders because I was a party to one lawsuit, right, and I was peripherally involved in a lawsuit on the Snyder Road parking lot. So I'm familiar with this personally.
Sure. The only thing is that there are 485 total seats identified in the existing plus all the new. The total for everything is 485. And 485 divided by 4 is 121 point something. So that's where he gets the 122 spaces that are required. Without the 19 spaces on the adjacent Lucky property, and without any spaces at CHCA on the Silver Spring House property, there are more than 122 spaces. So from a zoning standpoint, they meet the code. Now, that's just, they meet the minimum requirements of the zoning resolution. That's based on the information that they gave us and the zoning resolution itself.
But you know, just driving by on a Friday night at 5, 6, 7 o'clock, that lot is overflowing. Because there's cars always parked in the grass illegally. Now, they never get cited. It's up to the sheriff's department to cite them. I don't know why that's been neglected. I would imagine there've been complaints. I have not complained, but I would imagine other people have. But you're going to add 35 more cars on a Friday night in there. 35 more. Where are those 35 cars going to park? I mean, the numbers may work, but 35 more cars and the possibility of other larger gatherings in the 3,185 square feet or at some point down the road in the lower level. The numbers are one thing, but the reality is something else. And the reality is they don't have the space. They need 35 more spots right now.
And just that, to clarify that as well, what they've shown is storage in the basement and storage only. That's what they've represented would be in the basement, and that's what's shown on the plans. So that's what they would be restricted to if the plans were approved by the zoning commission.
What I need a small
retail in the future, they'd be in violation of their approved final development plan, and they would be subject to being cited if they were using it for commercial. They would have to come back to this commission for another public hearing to ask for it to be used for something other than storage.
If they have a large lower level, why do they need the size of a garage type barn on the other side? Why do they call it a shed, but you know, it's not like a portalet or two size. It's a small barn. Why do they need that?
Oh, I can't answer that. I just know that it meets the zoning requirements.
It might meet the requirements, but it's not aesthetically pleasing to the eye and from the residential neighborhoods to the north and south.
Brian, what is the public able to view the elevations that were submitted?
All of it was public record. I believe that Mr. Goldberg got all of the documents.
So when I look at the elevations of the shed looks to me of the same design, character, and material that the rest of the building, the larger structure, is made of. So I understand it's a subjective issue, but it's not totally incongruent with what's already there.
Mr. Dahl, can you provide us some insight as to what the shed will have as far as its contents?
Sure, certainly. Yeah, so the shed is needed to store items such as seasonal decorations. I'm sure you've all seen how well the spring decorates things during the different seasons, you know, the big spiders and all that type of stuff. So those things take up a lot of room. So it's that, and then also any kind of maintenance equipment and tables and chairs that when they're moving around, you know, especially the ones they can't use right now, they need a place for those. So it varies on what's stored, but trust me, you know, you never can have enough storage.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. I see where Mr.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Steinhardt is still on here. Is he able to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? You can. Can you hear me without the phone?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. I just wanted to add two points there. A lot of discussion. It's getting late. With regards to the illegal parking on the right of way, the berm, I drive a low car. And
Mark, could you give us your address, sir?
I'm sorry. My apologies. Mark Steinhardt, 8387 Chesney Lane, and that's in Heartland.
Thank you.
Again, with respect to the exit on Snyder Road, on more than one occasion, I drive a low car, and because all those cars are parked on the berm there, I've almost bought the farm being broadsided by people just hauling ass to get out of there, okay, and not seeing me. And of course, I can't see them when I'm blocked with all those cars. So I wanted to emphasize that one point back to your safety point. I know Ivanka made the point about music and noise, and I have no idea what the plans are, but when we're talking about big gatherings and noise, I want to share a true story. Literally in the last 2 weeks, I'm sitting out in my patio, and my patio faces east, okay, off of Chesney Lane. And I'm saying, what's that music I'm hearing? And I'll fast forward the story. I wound up getting in the car driving, and the Harper's Racket Club has a DJ spinning records. I clocked it 1/2 mile as the crow flies from where that music was. And I'm hearing that on my patio. Now it was a big wall, it's in the pool area there. So I'm sure the sound was bouncing off of that, but I can only imagine if there's going to be live music in these expansions at the Silver Spring House, and we are literally across the street, what that is going to sound like, the noise pollution there. So I just wanted to register those two things. On the safety, there already is a hazard because drivers cannot see people going north on Snyder. And again, I'm concerned about live music noise, just ruining the quality of life in Heartland. That's it.
Thank you. Let's see, participants. Is there anyone
Brian,
else?
are you there?
Yeah, yep. Sorry, I was just
Is
thinking
there any requirements for zoning for employees parking?
No, the 1 to 100 or 1 to 4 seats includes employee parking.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so the 1 to 100 square feet of space includes everything except for the bathrooms and the mechanical equipment. So it includes the kitchen, it includes the waiting area and all of that. And the point of that is to account for residents. I'm sorry, for employees.
Anyone else from the public that has not had a chance to speak yet?
No, all the attendees have had a chance to speak.
All right. In that regard, I will close the public hearing portion of the discussion and defer to my colleagues as far as a discussion amongst the panel. Does anyone have any comments?
I'm not sure if, you know, we are up to speed related to, Brian, do you think we need to have a copy of the easement for the parking next door and a copy of the access agreement to the CHCA parking field?
No, because those, like I said, they meet the parking requirements for zoning on their lot.
Okay.
And I have every reason to believe that Mr. Mr. Goldberg is correct. The CHCA, I believe, is a single-family residential zone in Sycamore Township, and I'm sure they have a conditional use that was approved by their Board of Zoning Appeals, and I'm sure it didn't account for commercial parking. And if Mr. Goldberg says that there was a lawsuit, there probably was one, because I know he's been involved in several in the township and on almost all of the commercial developments around Heartland.
Well, the concern, and this is why I bring this up, is the applicant, in effect, in order to alleviate some of the board's concern related to parking, mentioned these two agreements as being, in effect, relievers should there be any need for overflow parking beyond what the code requires. And so I'm concerned that if those things aren't in place, then where does that leave us?
Right. I don't believe that he has legal authority to do either one.
Right.
I mean, the practicality of people parking in the CHCA parking lot or people parking all the way down the Lucky office development, I mean, those spaces are open. People are going to park there. But legally, he's only allowed the 19 at Lucky office, and it sounds like none at CHCA.
Okay.
Then we really get back to square one with, I think, all of our collective concerns, which is parking today is all but insufficient to cover the existing restaurants, and now we're looking at adding another, whatever it is, 40-50%.
I think, honestly, the parking meets the zoning code, but in reality, it doesn't work. and it's going to work even less if we add this.
Yeah.
So the reality of it, if we turn it down, there's probably an easy appeal, would you say, Brian?
I would potentially, and the fact that this is a planned district, and that the final development plan is subject to review and approval by this commission, it does meet zoning, so you can't say that you're denying it because they don't have enough parking to meet the zoning requirements. But then there is, the character of the planned district as it was intended when it was approved. This commission did approve the final development plan for the previous expansion, the most recent one. And like you said, Mr. Flynn, the idea of the commission at the time, if you remember, it was that this would be it, and parking was discussed then. The parking on the grass was an issue at that point in time. So yes, they could argue that it meets zoning, so you don't have any authority to deny it based on that. But at the same time, you do have authority to grant the final development plan, and you can decide whether this is consistent with the intent of the original approval or not.
Okay.
My concern is the intensity of the development and the additional parking that addition requires. Granted, it falls within the number that's permissible, but just the size, the increase in the number of customers, it seems too intense for the area to maintain. It's a quaint, quiet neighborhood. That's the only restaurant or business within that immediate area. There's obviously development further down on Kemper. But as far as to maintain the consistency of the character of the neighborhood, to allow another 191 customers just seems to take away from the ambiance or the appeal. That's my concern. Plus the overflow parking issue, which has always been there. And there's been some discussion about noise. I'm not aware of any bands playing over there in the past, but I don't know what their intentions are. So those are just my concerns. Any other?
It addresses the parking concern, but you do have the authority to add a condition that would prevent outdoor entertainment.
Any other comments, or does someone want to put forth a motion?
Am I allowed
Brian, if I could ask,
It's Mr. Dahl, the applicant, Mr. Kessler, it's up to you if you'd like to allow
No.
it, but
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I know you're talking about lawsuits and things like that, but there are no lawsuits or court orders to deny us the 19 parking spots that we have that are mostly on Silver Spring House side and then partially on the Lucky side. Those 19 are exclusively the Spring House. I have documentation for that within my hand.
right, that was
Also,
agreed upon
just
as
as
part of the
well.
settlement, though. That's what Mr. Goldberg was saying. When the Lucky office went in, it was approved through court by a settlement agreement. It was initially denied by the township trustees and approved by a settlement agreement through the court system. And as part of that settlement agreement, that's where the 19 spaces are limited. So that settlement for the Lucky property prevents the use of any additional spaces above and beyond the 19.
Well, the documents that I have, you guys are gonna have to show me the court order, because I have documents here that say I have basically rights to an additional 28 spaces from the hours of 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. on the Robert Lucky's development along the East Kemper Road.
I do not have the.
we don't know what those documents are.
It is a easement agreement for ingress, egress, parking, and maintenance, and temporary construction easement.
But they haven't been submitted.
This is a
So
recorded.
I don't know what those documents, but
It's
I
a
don't know what
recorded
those
document
documents are.
with the Hamilton County Recorder. It's
That
recorded.
is not our responsibility, is to research recorded documents. Your responsibility is to provide the information to us.
Sure. Yeah, I can get this to you. I put that on the plan. If you look at page 1 of 7 on the plans, there's 2 hatched areas. I show with 1 hatch showing the reserved parking area for Silver Spring House for the easement agreement. and then I show the non-exclusive parking spaces per the agreement. So I show those in the plan on 1 of 7.
Right, then I did not review the settlement agreement for the Lucky office as part of this because they met the zoning requirements on the property. So the additional
Correct, which we do.
Calling out on the Lucky property is not, I think I said this at the beginning, we're talking about this property, not that property. So we can't really get into what's on that property. You can't enforce that on the adjacent property. Now, they might have an agreement, but we're not required to be a party to that agreement. That agreement can change at any time with the agreement of the property owner. So the two of them got together and said, hey, I don't have 28 spaces for you anymore. And they amended their agreement. That never comes before us. We never get to review it. So as far as we're concerned legally, they have the 19 spaces that are in that court order because that's a court order. And they have the spaces that are on their property, which meet zoning. So anything that's in an agreement like that, we don't typically review or give any credence to because it can change without the approval of the zoning department.
Understood. Fair enough. Well, then still we meet the zoning code.
Well, that may be true, Brian Snyder, but I think we've all reflected our significant concern about the parking, whether it meets the zoning law or not. It's still a concern, and I think that the extra spaces on the Lucky property would substantially alleviate some of our concerns.
Brian, if I can ask you a question, and we can take parking off the table in a sense. The bigger question is, it's a planned unit development of some sort. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we have the ability or the authority to approve it based on its intended use and how it uses within the guideline of the zoning code.
So it's required to meet the zoning resolution, yes. And you review that, you have the authority to either vary or enforce the guidelines of the zoning code. So that's one aspect of the review of final development plans. And then the second that I brought up was you do have the authority to determine if a final development plan is consistent with the intent of the original approval, because this is a modification of what was originally approved. And since they're modifying it, it's part of your review to determine if the modification is appropriate based on the original approval. So you do have the authority to deny a final development plan modification, even if it meets all of the basic standards of the zoning resolution. Otherwise, there would be no final development plan review. We would just check and see if it met the zoning code, and then we would approve it as staff if it did.
Correct. So that's what we're looking at is you verified that it quote unquote meets zoning. And then our responsibility is to meet if it met the original intentions of the plan.
That is,
and in this case,
review, right?
And it's a modification of such at this time.
Correct. That's the second part of your review. That's correct.
Okay. So that's what we're reviewing. Okay. I just want to understand what exactly. I think we kind of went off a tangent on parking, but I think that the basis of it is a modification to the PUD.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, I will add that in light of our discussion, whether it's safety or noise or parking, it's my belief that it does not meet the original intent of the review based on the intensity of the proposed development. Any additional comments?
I concur, Greg, and I would like to see the applicant kind of take a step back and really understand what's going on here. Again, I brought it up to Joe earlier. I was told at the last increase in space, covered space, that this was it. We're done. Not going to come back to you again. And okay, here you are. But I don't see this huge modification to a parking field. What could they do about it? there's ways of relief that would, I think, satisfy the board. You know, do you go back to the property owner next door and work with them and maybe be able to garner more spaces? Maybe, you know, maybe it's really costly. I don't know. Maybe you shutter one of the condo buildings and tear it down and work with the township in order to create more parking there. Do you acquire more property behind you? I don't know. You know, this is what a developer would have to do, realizing, you know, what the developer's asking the community to allow. And I think we're all struggling with the parking. We're not fighting something new. This has been going on. Again, this is a product of success, so it's tough to say no to that. We like that. We love it in our community. We don't want him to leave or forced to be moved to another location. But you know, we have to be concerned about some of this stuff. So I echo your concern.
I'd love to see a parking study where, you know, they could actually show that they have sufficient space with the project, irrespective of what the zoning rules require. But if they could prove that they have a plan for parking wherever it is, you know, they can build a parking deck for all I care. But, you know, however they want to do it, if they could prove to us that they've got a engineer certified plan, I'd be inclined to accept that. But otherwise, it's all speculation at this point.
So Brian, if I can ask a question, what we can do tonight is either approve, deny, or table the modification presented in front of us. Is that correct?
We could approve with conditions
as well. So yes, approve with conditions, or deny it are the three actions that you can take, but you do have the authority to continue it to a future date as well.
And that's based on the modification to the development plan.
That's actually the same for everything that comes before you. You always have the authority to do all of those things.
Okay.
Would someone like to put forth a motion?
I motion that we table the Symmes 2014-02 Silver Spring House 3, consider approval of a modification of the final development plan to allow the construction of 3,158 square foot building addition and a walk-in cooler on the main building and installation of a 500 square foot storage shed on the property.
Before anybody seconds that, let me clarify what your motion is: to continue the case?
Yes, to table it, yes.
So continuation for what? Like, what would you be looking for?
So that the board has more time to understand the parking scenario and ask the applicant to provide the documentation related to the parking easement next door, and since they mentioned it, to provide a copy of the agreement with CHCA as it pertains to their parking.
Okay, so the purpose of the continuance is to allow them more time to get parking clarifications, like Mr. Reichman said, so that they can make a case for how they have enough parking and provide documentation of such.
Yes.
Okay. And that will be continued until the October 4th meeting, if that's your motion.
That is my motion.
Would that allow the public hearing portion to be opened up as well, or is that just simply?
So the public hearing, you closed public testimony, but the public hearing is all the way up until you take a vote of some kind. So yes, the public hearing would be continued. That's what my understanding of Mr. Flynn's motion was, to continue the public hearing in progress until the October 21st meeting. That's what I wrote down. Is that your motion, Mr. Flynn?
That is my motion, unless someone wants to provide a second motion or to alter that motion.
One motion at a time.
Could you repeat the motion, Brian?
To continue the public hearing in progress until the October 21st regular meeting. That's how I wrote it down.
I second the motion.
Ms. Bucco,
Yes.
Mr. Etter,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Mr. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Reichman.
Yes.
Okay, so at the next meeting, this case will be reopened. For anybody in the attendees area that's listening, there will be another Zoom meeting October 21st to continue this public hearing.
The only thing I would add to that, I believe in our new business section, there's a possibility we may have a live in-person meeting for October, depending on how the board decides. So since we haven't decided yet, I just want to make everyone aware that this could potentially be at the safety center versus Zoom. We haven't decided yet. All right.
I'd also like to say that, you know, hopefully the applicant takes the opportunity to provide us with the information that we're going to be waiting for, and you know, including any of the parking studies and the documentation relative to the agreements with CHCA and the Lucky property.
And we do send that information out a week in advance to the commission as staff. So if you could get it to staff as early as possible, we'd be able to include it in the regular packet that goes to the commission. That would be the best. That's 1 week before the meeting.
Thank you. Moving on to old business. Kim,
I have none.
None. Excellent. New business.
We already had a meeting for next month, so this will be another case on the agenda.
All right, but I
what else is on the agenda for next month?
I knew you asked me that. I was just started to think about what they were. There's the
Burger King down Loveland Madeira Road.
Say that again.
Burger King down on Loveland Madeira Road.
Another final development plan modification for that, and there's one other one, I believe. I think I just sent it to you today, though. Actually, I'll think.
It's okay. We didn't want to put you on the spot. I apologize.
With respect to the October meeting, any comments as to whether we maintain the Zoom status or we have it live at the safety center?
Can Jana, can you describe the safety measures that would be in place if we hold the meeting in the safety center?
Well, they would, the trustees are going back to their meeting, so they have it set up with plexiglass, plus they put space in between everybody, and everybody wears masks and everything, because they've already had one public meeting there back in August or July somewhere. So I know the trustees are going back there, and I've never been there, so I really can't answer that question.
Fair enough.
It's a big room. It's not bad. I was there for the I think it was in July for the for the land use plan update public meeting. It wasn't bad. The spacing is pretty good because it's a very large space.
Would we have to wear masks as a part of the board?
I believe so.
Okay.
Trustees were.
How close would we be to each other?
That's a good question because there's only 3 of them, but there's 2 other people that sit up there as well. So it's normal seating, like the spacing isn't increased, but there is plexiglass between the spaces on the whatever they call that up there, the desks.
This is kind of a separate reason. I don't think it's a bad, I mean, if the trustees have been having meetings there, it doesn't seem like a bad idea to go to in-person meetings. I do want to make you aware, though, that I'm having surgery on October 5th and my mobility will be impacted. So the likelihood of me being able to attend that meeting versus a Zoom meeting is much lower. If you think we won't have a quorum, it may mean we're not having a meeting.
Well, I will say this too, the ability to meet on Zoom was granted by the state, which is the only reason that we're allowed to have these meetings on Zoom to begin with. It expires or set to expire in December. I want to say it's through December, so you can meet remotely through December. The Board of Zoning Appeals just discussed this on Monday and then took the approach that they were going to meet by Zoom until they were told they had to meet in person again.
Okay.
That's my vote.
I'm okay with that. I'm not a big fan of wearing a mask and talking with other people. I like to see people's face. Maybe I'm old school in that regard. So I'm happy with Zoom. I just wanted to give everyone the option.
I'm okay with Zoom.
I'm fine with it too. Hopefully we can get the front end a little better coordinated next time. So we all can get on.
Sounds good. Do we need to take an official vote on that, Jana, or are we good to go?
No, I'll just tell them you're doing Zoom.
Okay. I guess we're a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I will second.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Mr. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Reichman,
Yes.
Mr. Eder,
Yes.
Ms. Bucco.
Yes.
Good luck with your procedure and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Good job.